continuing with our project. So we finished iteration 6 and we now can navigate from one screen to the other. So the next step is to transfer data from one screen to the next. And this this video would be the last part for the main project for the undergraduate class. The graduate class will have to continue to part iteration number 8. Iteration 8 is extra credit for the undergraduate class. If you're taking this or watching this video to increase your knowledge, keep going. You want to learn as much as you can. So, so we have a navigation to a second screen, and I was gonna start thinking about it and decided to discipline myself and follow the process and think about it part of the process. So iteration 7 is what we want to do is to display color on the second screen. Display select the color from the main screen on the second one, So let's discuss problem formulation, which will take us to the scope. And the scope is that the user navigates to the second screen, or let's start, the user selects or constructs a color on main screen, then navigates to the second screen and see that color displayed. That's basically what we want to accomplish. Testing scenario is simple. Testing scenario 1, user selects red color and navigates to see red on the second screen. Testing scenario 2, user selects combined color and returns, selects combined color and navigates to see it on the second screen and returns. And then testing scenario 3, select a color with alpha 50% and navigates to see the color, and so on. You can have many combinations here, and you may ask, do I have to test for all possible combinations? If these combinations are defined, the answer is yes. If it's undefined, like this case, there are unlimited possibilities of colors that you can make. We're not going to make every single possibilities. We can't. So you would take enough combinations where you would have tested almost all the boundaries. So you test with zeros, you test with 1, you test with all of them zeros, all of them 1, all of them in the middle, to make sure that you accounted for all the possible scenarios. So that's the scope and testing scenarios. Then we move to the solution formulation. So in the solution formulation, we talk about the model. And the model represents the data. So no change in the model for the first screen. Actually, I shouldn't do that. We actually, in the model, we need to add, I leave it that. No change in the model in the first screen, but we need a color object on the second screen, right? Because on the first screen, I already have a color, I already have all the data, but when I go to the second screen, I don't have anything. So I need at least to have a color object there that I can then use to display. Then the view. Now you start to see the complexity. We have first screen, and on the first screen, no changes to the view. I already have everything I need to construct the color and to navigate to the second screen. So on the second screen, What do I need on the second screen? I need a place to show the color, because the purpose here is just to display the color. So the second screen has a view, or I can add a view like I did in the first screen and use the background color to display that. Because I am moving on in iteration 8 to something else, I don't want to add a second view. So I'm just going to use, so no changes to the second screen either, because I'm going to use the existing view on the screen and change that color. All right. So now the controller. So we have the view controller, which is the custom controller for the first screen. And I have the color view controller, which is the custom controller for the second screen. The view controller on the first screen, I have sliders that are in the class, and I have inside the display color function, I create, I retrieve the values and create the color. Now, when the user click paint and say, I want to move to the second screen, at that time, at that event, the main screen has a color. The main screen should then take that color and copy it to the first screen. So takes that color and copy it to the first screen, to the second screen, I am sorry. So in the view controller, I need to capture or respond to the event of the navigation. Actually, not the navigation, the pre-navigation. Pre-navigation. There is actually a function similar to view.did_load, which is like an internal function or a function that responds to an internal event, which is part of the UI view controller, called the prepare for segue. Because the segue is what will transition from the main screen to the second. The prepare for segue function is automatically notified right before the segue is about to leave. Like so segue establish the connection between the two screens. Imagine two islands and you're gonna build a bridge. So you built the bridge, and right before the truck loads, you get notified the truck or the train is about to leave. So you take your box of items and go put it on the train so that it can leave with the train and go on the other side. So that's basically the same idea. This function, prepare for segue, is notified. So in that function, I need to connect a color on that main screen and send it to the second. So to do that, on the second screen, I need to add a color object. So I need to add a color object or attribute. And in the prepare for segue, I need to initialize the color object on the second screen with the value of the color selected by the user or constructed by the user. So that's what I need to do in the prepare for segue. Now we will run into a trouble. We'll talk about it in the implementation because it's going to be difficult to abstract it here. So we'll leave that for now. And then in the second controller, I need to define a color object as an attribute. Then I need to color the background. So when do I do that? So respond to the view.did_load function on the second screen. So I respond to that function. Whenever the second screen is loaded, that view.did_load function will be called. So that's the event, that's the notification. So in that function, I need to assign the color object to the background of the view of the screen. The background color of the view object of the screen. All right. You'll see that when we get to work on it. So now the solution implementation. And by the way, I have done this for so long, so now my iterations are neat and complete. If you're solving a problem for the first time, and when I solved this problem for the first time, my iterations will not as clear and complete like that. I will just write what comes to mind and then go to the code, figure out some things, and come back and write it, and sometimes I figure it out and I move on. But the thinking in the beginning puts me in the right direction and tells me what I need to do. If I don't know how to do it, I go do some research and understand or read or ask someone until I figure it out. Then I move on and proceed. So don't expect from yourself, if you're solving a problem on your own, that your iterations will be as complete in the beginning. Sometimes it will, but if it is not, don't feel that something is bad. Like it will come with the process. And sometimes your iteration is too complex. So maybe consider breaking it down into multiple iterations. That can help as well. So what we need to do in solution implementation, the first step is add an attribute of add an object of UI color to the color view controller. Yeah, I'll probably do that second screen first. To the view controller as an attribute. So it's defined in the class, not inside the function. Then add instructions to color the background of the view object with the color object value. We're not going to initialize in the second screen, but in the first screen, I need to add, but before I add that, you'll see we have a is to implement prepare for Segue function to assign the user selected color object to the color object in the second screen. All right. So that's what we need to do in the second screen, and that should get it done. So let's move on to our code and see how we can do that. So in the beginning, remember, the challenge is each screen is independent entity, isolated island. It does not see what the other one has. So in order to let the data from one screen go to the other, you have to actually physically, manually, or digitally and manually move it from one to the other, or copy it from one to the other, or assign it from one to the other. So I have a color that the user created in the first screen, and I want to position it to color this background on the second screen. So I created a custom controller for the second screen called Paint View Controller. So the first step is to go to that Paint View Controller, and I used the template, and the template added this comment, so I'm going to delete that. I don't need it. I'm going to make two steps. The first step is to initialize an object of UI color. So I say var and give it a name. I will call it paint color, and the type is UI color, and I'll use the exclamation mark to indicate that I am not going to initialize it. Won't initialize, as it will be initialized in the first screen controller, similar to what we do with the outlets. Then in the view did load, what I need to do in the view did load is change the background color of the view with the paint color. So we have a view. This is the view. The white area inside the controller is connected to this controller as the variable view. If you don't believe me, we can go to the storyboard right click on the controller of the second screen or the first, and here is the view. See, it says that there's a variable called the view, and that variable is connected to the large white area that is called the view. So that connection is already made. Remember, in the first screen, when we wanted to connect to this one, we had to make a connection because I did not want a color on the main view. But here, I'm going to use the main view. So I can say view and then dot, use the dot operator to access the property. So it has the background color property, and then we'll say equal the paint color. So I finished what I need to finish on the second screen controller. I created an attribute object as a class attribute, and you'll see in a moment why we did that. And then we added an instruction in the view.load so that as soon as the screen loads, the color background changes from the white that it has to the whatever is here. So let's move to now. So we're done with the second screen. Let's move to the first screen. What do I want to do in the first screen? I want the moment the user click paint and it's about to transition, I need to capture that event and use the segue to create a connection between the color attribute I created in the paint view and the color that I created here. Alright, so let's go that. It sounds a lot more complex than perhaps it is. Well, it is complex. So here is my class, and my class has some attributes, the labels and the sliders and the view. And my class also has the display color, in which we used all these colors here. And here is the user color that we initiated, and here is how we assigned it to the color view. And here is the view.load, which we didn't really use at all. So I can come here and I need to create the function or implement the function prepare for segue. So the function is called prepare for segue. So if you start typing prepare, you should see that function in the list. So here is the function prepare. It's the name is now prepare. I'm sorry, not prepare for segue. Swift 3 changed a lot of the names, so I apologize if I'm still using old names. But the function name is prepare. Maybe I should go and fix it here. It's called the prepare now. So the function prepare and whatever segue, and then for the sender, whoever launched that segue. Says notifies the view controller that a segue is about to be performed, and it has the override which tells you that the function is not your own, it comes from the base class, the UI view controller. And that's why we extended that UI view controller and did not create from scratch, because it has a lot of features that we need. Now, the way to read this function, first there's this word code. Make sure you delete that. It's like a placeholder, but it's actually, you get a compilation error if you leave it. So this is the name of the function. Override means it comes from the main class. The keyword function indicates it's a function. This is the body of the function where you put all your instructions. Now, for is called a label. So that's the label of that first variable. So ignore the label for now. But the label is part of the name of the function, prepare for segue. So you see, so the for is the label and the segue is the parameter name. So a function can receive some information. In this case, when the user initiates a segue, the operating system captures that and notifies this function, and the function says, when you notify me, I need two things. I need the actual segue, the actual bridge. I need a reference to the bridge. And I need the sender. I need the object that initiated it. An object that initiated that call. In our case, it will be that button, the paint button. All right. This segue variable is extremely important, because that variable is connected to this bridge between the two screens. And this bridge has very important piece. It has a source controller and it has a destination controller. The destination controller is the paint view. And that's how I'm gonna get access to the inside of that paint view. I told you that the view controller and the paint view are two separate entity isolated islands. But with the Segue, the paint view is connected and the source is also connected. So from the source I can get a reference to the destination, and once I get a reference to the destination I can access all its attributes and all its functions. So the first thing is that I need to get a reference to the destination controller. So I say let destination equal. Use the Segue and ask the Segue to give you the destination. Now pay attention. The destination has a type UI view controller, which is a generic large type. It's the same type as this main class. But in my Segue, the destination type is paint view controller. The paint view controller is also a view controller, so that's how I'm able to relate to it. But if I keep it as a UI view controller type, I will not be able to access this particular object that I need. Why? Because this is not an object of UI view controller, it's an object of my own custom class paint view controller. So what I need in the destination is to take the destination and change its type. It's called casting. So I use as to change its type to the paint view controller. To the type paint view controller. So I'm changing types here. And I think it's giving me error. It's giving me error and suggests to me what to do. It suggests to me that it needs to force a downcast. The downcast meaning that destination is the general and paint is the specific. So going from general to specific is dangerous because, well, I'm gonna get too sophisticated here. Ask me if you need more detail here. But going from general to specific in Swift is forbidden unless you specifically know what you're doing, and that's what this message is saying. Saying, hey, you're going from a view controller to paint view controller. Are you sure? And I say, yes, I am sure. So it says, well, then you have to suppress the error by using the exclamation point mark right after the as. So the as is a keyword to change the type, but if you're going to the type from a general to specific, you need to suppress the error. Similar to what we do here when we suppress the initialization. Alright, so now I got the destination. So what do I need to do? Use the destination to assign the color to the color object. It's two colors, but you'll see here. So here is the destination, and I can use the dot operator to open up everything inside. And what's inside? The paint color we just created. So now I have access from the first screen. So now something amazing happened. In the first screen, I have access to the memory of the second screen. And I can then assign to it anything I want. So what do I want to assign to it? I want to assign the color that I created. But if I type user color, there's no user color. See? Xcode doesn't recognize a user color and can turn you crazy because you can see it here on line 32. There is user color. So how come Xcode can't recognize it? I'll tell you. Similar to each screen being an isolated island, each function is an isolated island. So this user color was created, the let keyword or the var keyword was used inside the function display color. So it's only visible and accessible inside that function. We call it scope. The scope of that variable is only inside that function. and I'm trying to access it from a completely different island. It doesn't exist on that island. So what do? I need the color that was created in the display color in a way I can access it in another function. The only way you can deal with this is to use one of the variables that you created with the class scope. So the function scope is limited to the function. So the display color, anything you create inside display color, you can use only in display color. Anything you create inside prepare, you can use only in prepare. But anything you create inside the class, you can use anywhere in the class. We call it class scope. The rule of thumb, the variable you define inside a block is accessible anywhere inside that same block. So a block is this body between the curly braces. So if you define a variable inside the block of the display color, you can only use it inside display color. But if you define it inside the class block, you can use it anywhere inside the class. So I have two options here. I can create a class variable and initialize it to the user color in display and then use it in prepare. Or you probably may have noticed that I already have the color view, and the color I have, I assigned it to the background color. So I can retrieve it from the background color. So instead of using the user color, I can use the color view and use its background color. So I assign the background color of the color view to this paint color that I have. So let's go ahead and see. This has a big advantage because the color view has a default background color. So here is a color, brown, paint, here is brown. Let's make the alpha 100%. So the color back, let's change the color, back, change the color again, back, change the color again, back. So as you can see, anytime we change the color, we come back and see that same color. Even if you do a white color, you go back and see the white color. There is something happens once you move the alpha to less. When you try to do that, you get that thing and you do not get the actual color. Here, this is a light yellow. You go there, you get a darker greenish type color. Do you know why? When you change the alpha, the color is lighter on this screen, but when we go to the second screen, it is more darker, and it has that hesitation in the beginning. Remember what the alpha mean? The alpha is the percentage of the opacity. So 100% opacity means that you can see the full color over its background. A 0% opacity means that you do not see the color, you only see the background. What is the background here? The background is another view layer, which is white, so that's why I see white. But what is the background on the second screen? There's no background. I'm coloring on the first layer. I'm coloring on the view. So behind the view, there's nothing. So I see the black and I see the hesitation because behind there's nothing. So when you mix the color with white, you get it lighter, but you mix it with black, you get it darker. So this is why in this particular case, if you test for an alpha less than 100%, you're not going to see the exact degree of the color because you are transparent to white on one and transparent to black on the other. So that is this part, and that concludes this part of the application. And if you go back to the initial intent, so the initial intent here was that the user select a color and use it to change the background on a second screen, and that is accomplished. So this completes that part, which is the required part for the undergraduate. And then the next video will talk about, now we're gonna go to the second screen. I don't want to color the background. I want to use this and paint a picture, and then go back and paint more, and so on and so forth. And we'll do that in the next video, which is extra credit for the undergraduate class and required for the graduate one. Thank you.